There, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Ion College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do. To that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you're not yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please do that while you're here. Let's get into it. Notable headline from the past, 24 hours or so. The NCAA has presented conference commissioners with at least two different models that could expand the NCAA tournament from 68 to 72 or 76 teams starting as early as the 2025-26 season. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, you know that I don't want this. I think you probably know Norlander doesn't want this, but it appears that we are going to get this, and sooner rather than later. Norlander, you tell me, what can you add to the headline?
Well, there's a lot to get to here, but I don't want to info dump for 7 minutes, so I'll try and put this.
That's your go-to.
No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not. I will lead on this. I will say this, because I spoke to a variety of sources that were in the room on Wednesday at the Ritz-Carlton in Naples, Florida. Must be nice. It's been multiple days. The Conference Commissioners Association meets every single year in person around this time. So this was a regularly scheduled thing. They go, they have really expensive meals, and they talk about the state of college athletics and try.
They never meet. There ain't never been a Conference Commissioners meeting at the Spring Hill Suites.
I actually joked with one of these commissioners yesterday. I was like, "You guys at the courtyard this year?" I was like, "Where are you?" He's like, "No, not at the courtyard. No shot."
The Atlantic 10 invited me down one year to one of their spring meetings or whatever, and they were like, would you be interested in coming? Ritz-Carlton. I was like, yeah, say less. I'll be there.
Exactly. So they met at the Ritz-Carlton Naples, and they actually wrapped up today. Charlie Baker spoke earlier today on a variety of issues. The majority of what they talked about, by the way, is obviously the House case looming settlement. Still technically has to get settled by the judge and all that stuff, and the fallout from that. But there are some connective threads between that issue and NCAA tournament expansion. But in speaking to a number of sources and commissioners there, the one thing that Gavitt did say multiple times is, there's no guarantee we will actually expand the NCAA tournament, but I know that all of you have been waiting on the next step in this. Well, here's a step. If we decide to do it, here are the models that we're going to look at. It would be either a 72 or a 76 team model. So let's just start there. I had reported this well over a year ago, but people kind of continued to talk about it as though 96 or 90 teams or whatever might be possible. That's completely off the table. In fact, I was told by multiple sources that even 80 teams is not going to be a thing. It is either going to be 72 or 76. And then in speaking to a couple of sources, they heavily lean toward, if we expand, and there's a poll, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to vote in it. Nada, you can hit me with those results in 15 or so minutes. Those sources believe that if we expand, it will only be to 72 teams. The biggest reason for that, and there are details I want to dive into this with you, GP, but I'll at least set up these parameters, get your response, and we can continue the discussion from there. They are not changing the calendar of the season. It is going to remain that the men's and women's tournament ends the weekend leading into the Masters. The Masters is obviously never changing when it's played, let alone where it's played. And so it makes sense, obviously. So that's going to continue to be where it is. And then they are not moving up the start date to the regular season. They're not changing, most specifically when conference tournaments are played. So you still only have the 3-week window. Well, logistically, asking to get more than 76 teams, and this is a paraphrasing from someone who was quoting Dan Gavitt in the room on Wednesday, even up to 80 becomes a logistical headache, because you have to get these teams in quick turnaround to go fly off somewhere to play these first 4 games, and they got to turn right back around, and they got to travel somewhere else. And so because of that, if we do expand, that second site, which I actually thought if expansion was coming would be at Hinkle, because you're in the NCAA's backyard, you're in the Midwest, you're right in the middle of the country. That's apparently not the preferred possibility. Again, if we get there, it would be more Western based. Where that is, still don't know. So that if we were to have 72 or 76 teams, those teams could travel to that spot, and then the winners would then continue on to play in the pods that are based more in the Western time zone. So there's plenty more here, but I want to toss it right back to you before I add even more context and some of the devil in the details on a lot of this stuff here. Your thoughts that we've arrived at this point, and the fact that we have arrived at this point isn't, I know the news headline kind of lands out of nowhere, but this was, again, an annually scheduled thing. Commissioners always meet every year, and this was on the agenda to at least be discussed. And now these commissioners are going to take a lot of this information, including more that I'll give you in just a minute, go back to their constituents in their conferences, talk about, do you want to stay at 68? Do you want to go 72, 76? They will eventually funnel that information back to the NCAA in the coming weeks. The selection committee will meet in Utah in July to dig into the issue further. What are your thoughts, GP?
Well, we're going there. I respect Dan, obviously, and I understand we're not there yet and there's no guarantees, but we are going there. They're talking about it too much to not be taking it there. The people with the power to make decisions like this seem to want it to go there. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much what you and I or people in the chat think about what this will do to the regular season, how it cheapens whatever. It's a moneymaker. It will produce more postseason games, and those are worth money.
It's actually not, though. That's one of the details we got to get to. It is not a moneymaker right now. If you want, keep going if you want, but that's like one of the biggest issues. It's expanding the tournament will probably lead to the NCAA losing more money.
There'll be more money available for conference members just in the pot. There'll be a bigger pot of money.
No, there won't, because the media contract with our company, obviously CBS and Warner Brothers, that goes until 2032. That's not going to get significantly amended. And I mean, I've got a couple of quotes here. One of the biggest issues with all of this is if you expand the men's tournament, they're going to expand the women's tournament. Okay. And there's no desire to expand the women's tournament, but they're not going to do one and not the other. The women's tournament loses approximately $10 million each year, loses money. Now the sport is gaining more popularity, but it just signed a new media rights deal for the women's tournament on the ESPN side. Had two sources tell me on Wednesday that if you expand the women's tournament, ESPN's not required to pay a single cent more for more teams, more games, more anything in that. And so because of all the costs tied to charter planes, securing the building, all of the expenses in the millions of dollars it would require, that's why this is actually a bit of a thorny issue, because this men's media rights deal won't renew until 2032, and it will actually wind up costing the NCAA more money to expand the tournament, even if the big conferences, by nature of getting more teams in, and I want to get to that in a little bit, they could stand to potentially make more money on a conference basis. The actual enterprise, the tournament itself, would likely lose money if it decided to add more teams. The NCAA is obviously not in the business of wanting to lose money.
The women's side is, I understand they have to be connected in some way. I understand the thought behind that. Obviously, that complicates stuff, because if you expand, this goes without saying, if you expand a tournament that loses money, you should just be losing more money. Right.
That's basically what will happen. Yes, they are guaranteed to lose more money if they expand this thing.
Okay, yeah. So I clearly believe that the women's side, you got real problems trying to expand that. You're just taking a money loser and making it bigger. It's like taking a restaurant that loses money and then saying let's double the size. Well, you're just going to double the. That's not good. So I get that. Just listen, and we can. My understanding in talking to people about this has always been, when the NCAA, the men's, I'm talking specifically about the men's side, the number one motivator for doing it, leading up to these times was always, there's just more money to be had. Yes, they'll talk about you can get more teams in, and it's more inclusive, and you realize like more than half of the NBA teams are in the playoffs, and it's such a small percentage of Division I men's basketball team. They'll say all those things, more opportunities for student athletes, blah, blah, blah. The way it has always been presented to me is that if you want to know why we're going to go down this path, it's from 64 to 68, you could make more money. And from 68 to 72 or 76, eventually, the bigger the tournament, the more money you will make. That's the way it's always been explained to me.
And as I give more details here, I'll just kind of inject a little bit of opinion. Because of the money issue with this, and because there's this uncertainty looming with the House case, I'm obviously extremely anti-expansion. And as are most sports fans, I think it's idiocy to expand the field. I don't think there's anything that is really, you can't give me a good reason to do it, basically, or a compelling reason to do it. But if you are still, if the NCAA, which, I already know there are some people that are against, at the NCAA level, there are people that are against the idea of expanding the tournament, but there's politics and bureaucracy that is in a lot of this kind of stuff. And these conference commissioners at the power level, they wield a lot of power. And so there's a lot that's being done here. I would you got to sit and wait and hold on this, because know what kind of, and Mike Krzyzewski said this, I think he said it on Dan Patrick back in March. He's like, don't touch the tournament. Why would you do anything to this amazing event that has as high of an approval rating as basically any major American sporting event until you know what kind of economic landscape we are going to be in near the end of this decade, economic and media landscape, which I still think there's a chance that might be the case. We'll see. I think you are way benefited by, okay, let's see what the next 2 years bring, where we are with house case settlement, how much the NCAA is going to wind up paying, how much the schools and conferences are dinged by this, because there are so many aspects to college basketball that are impacted and affect this decision. We talked about the men's and women's side of it. The money side of it is significant there. Talked about the calendar side of it.
Well, let me just say one last thing on the money side.
Go ahead.
Listen, I'd be interested in speaking to somebody who could explain to me how expanding a money-making men's NCAA tournament would lose money. I'd be willing to listen.
Okay.
But I would just say, in every other money-making postseason event in American sports, when you expand, you make more money. The NBA playoffs expand, they make more money. Major League Baseball playoffs expand. Why? Because they tell the players, if you'll do this, we will make more money. NFL playoffs expand, we make more money. So maybe you don't make more money in year one or year two, but eventually, and this is sort of where I'm getting, I think we're getting caught up in eventually we will get to a point where the NCAA tournament will expand. And when it expands, the main motivating factor there will be because somebody has told the people with the power to do this, you can make more money doing this.
So as I understand it, we do not determine we've not seen the broadcast contract, obviously, on this. CBS and Warner Brothers Discovery they're locked into a very great deal on the media side that's till 2032. Sure, yeah. If you add more games, might there be a little bit more that gets paid out to the NCAA because of that? Yes, maybe. But anyone will tell you teams 69 through 72 or 69 through 76, they actually don't provide a ton of value. And where they land on in the course of that week, Selection Sunday is a massive day. You got Monday off, then you'll have games on Tuesday and Wednesday. Might those pick up a little bit? Yes, but they are not highly in-demand games. These teams would effectively, when you add these teams, they are pulled out of the first round of the tournament. And there's actually a careful what you wish for element to this, in that if you're a power conference team and you wind up having to play an extra round, or the opponent that you actually play winds up being more difficult. If you go back and look at over the past decade or so, since we've had the first four, and you look at the teams that filter in through the first four and get into that, you know how the team always makes it to the second round. It actually isn't the best situation for the teams in those spots there, because you're playing theoretically better competition. And so your likelihood of advancing to the second round is diminished. What happens there? You don't get the NCAA tournament unit for the victory there. So keep an eye on how much that discussion bubbles up even a little bit more. It wasn't brought up in the room yesterday, I was told, but I do think it's a significant factor to consider. Not that it's going to hold back. Also,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just saying, a lot of this that happened on Wednesday, so our viewers and listeners really understand, a lot of this was Dan Gavitt, who runs the men's tournament, and then Lynn Holtzman, who does the women's side. A lot of it was presenting information. They weren't putting up brackets. They weren't putting up, here's what the field would look like. It was more like, here's what it is, bullet point A, B, C, and D. We'd probably play in the Central West or out West if we added a second first four site. We don't know what that would be called. We'd have to talk about units and how much we'd actually make money. And here's why we don't stand to make a lot more money in this. And the house case is looming over all of this. On the women's side, just real quickly on this, because the tournament it keeps in, it gets more popular. Those top 16 teams play at home sites. I was told that there's not an immediate desire to change the format of the women's tournament right now. It's got a different, in terms of where the games are played, you've got the best seeds play at home for the first weekend. And then this past few years, they've actually only had 2 regional sites. And there's debate about, will they go back to 4 sites? Will they go to predetermined neutral sites like the men? I was told that's not necessarily going to happen anytime soon. One more bit of note. I still got more for you, GP, but then I'll toss it back to you. If you're wondering on a timeline for all of this stuff, the earliest that we would see an expanded field, shudder at the thought, would be 26. The latest that we could get a decision to make that official is April 1 of next year. However, going back months now, I've been told that a decision on expansion, even though I think they would be bettered by waiting, I really do, at least 2 years, I was told it was highly likely that a decision, yes or no, on any kind of expansion would happen within the calendar year of 2024. My expectation personally is that decision might get made come the fall. but just sit and wait on that. I still have more, but again, I don't want to dominate the mic. Give me what you got.
I just want to one last thing on the money, and then let's stop talking about money. If they didn't think this was either going to be a money maker expansion or the potential to be a money maker, they wouldn't even be talking about it this seriously. They wouldn't even be looking at it this seriously. That's why I'm not questioning what anybody's told you. I'm just saying, if it was like, well, if we expand to 76, we're going to lose money, it wouldn't even be a conversation.
Well, I think once the contract renews in 32, then that's when you're going to get the boom. I mean, that's when it's going to. But until then, unless there is some sort of loophole or out that I've been made unaware of by multiple sources that I've talked to, there just doesn't. They are not going to make more money by expanding the tournament. That it was clearly laid out to me because of all of the costs. Again, the women's side period loses money, and then when you factor in, you got to run these buildings, turn them on, fly the teams out, all the NCAA expenses. The NCAA will lose money if it expands the NCAA tournament for the next till the end of the decade. Once we get to a new deal, the more of what you're talking about is going to wind up being true. However, to your point, GP, I did have one source tell me that there are some commissioners willing to do the trade-off. They are actually, which is hilarious to me. When it comes to getting more representation into the tournament, and again, I still have a point on this that I'm going to make before we get out of here, that they will say, okay, if we're going to lose out on additional revenue, then if we get more access, this access buzz term just drives me up a wall. If we're going to have more access, meaning more representation, meaning an 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th team from our conference in the field, then we can accept that for the short term there. I find that to be a little bit ironic, but I was told that that's a willing compromise that some of these commissioners are at least embracing at this point, knowing that as everyone's so concerned about money, how much schools and conferences are going to pay out in the house case settlement, that the NCAA tournament, you'll still get money, don't get me wrong, but this is not going to provide a jump. It's not going to provide a surplus, and it's more about having more teams in this damn field.
Okay. Eventually, we're going to expand the NCAA tournament. Can we agree on that? Whether it's 2026 or
you are
32,
going to have to drag me to that admission. I'm not going to do is sit here and say it's not going to happen. I think that we are getting there. I don't like it whatsoever. But because you have all of these commissioners that are just so eager for it to happen, and then you've got Dan Gavin, the NCAA staff that, frankly, I don't think are that eager to make it happen, and they're going to try and find some sort of compromise. That's why we might be headed there. But I will say this, there are definitely extremely compelling reasons to not expand the NCAA tournament at this point. And I don't know if this one falls first, second, or ninth in line. When you do it, it will be nearly universally regarded as the wrong decision.
I'm with you in the sense that I don't think it's necessary and I don't want it. I think I fall short of you when I say this. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think, like, there are some people who go all the way to it will ruin the sport, kill the regular season. And I don't buy that. I think that's a overreaction to reality and to any lesson we've learned in the history of American sports. Everything expands. The NFL playoffs used to be smaller than they are now. They expanded.
I know, but at what point does that hit a saturation level? Like,
you tell me. I mean, at what point? It's 53% of NBA teams make the playoffs and 67% make the postseason.
Yeah, it's too much, by the way. Yeah, I would argue that it's too many. And the baseball are the baseball playoffs better now, GP? You got a Mets hat on as we talk. Would you rather take the baseball playoffs as they stand now or go back to 1996 as they were then? Right
now? Are you kidding me? The Mets are 13 and a half games out of first place in the East. If this were 1993, they'd be out of it. It's over. The season would be I would have no reason to watch the Mets and Cubs tomorrow afternoon if it were 1990 right now. So this is actually a point I wanted to make. Up until 1994, it was just like you got to win your division or you're not in the baseball playoffs. Yeah. All right. The Mets season would be over right now if it were 1993. It would just be over.
Are you sure the Mets season isn't over right now?
We're one game out of the third wild card.
Okay.
Are we below 500? Yes. Do we stink? Of course.
Okay.
But one game out of the wild card. This is my point. All right. So by the way, in 1994, then they had one wild card.
Well, there was no World Series champion in 1994. Shouts to the Expos, by the way. But I hear you.
but they added. I think that's when they added the.
I think
the
you're right, but that was
okay.
obviously the famous strike.
Yeah. They had a second wild card in 2019, and right now we have a third wild card in each league. So it's 3 division winners, 3 wild cards, 6 teams from each league, 12 teams in the postseason, 12 out of 30. I just know that I'm a Mets fan. I'm a baseball fan, but I'm a Mets fan more than I'm a baseball fan. And right now I've got reasons to watch because the Mets are still in it. If it were 1990, pre-expansion, I would have no reason to watch. They would be done in the East. So the expansion in Major League Baseball is, at least in this moment, making me and other Mets fans look at the wild card standings every day, watch games every day. And so I understand the sentiment because I look at this stuff like everybody else does. Like you and I, we live this every day. So we're aware of it more than most. So God, we look at it and we go, really? Now, if you expand to 76, then this crap team's in and this crap team's in. Do we really want to do that?
Well, I mean, that is also true. But obviously, as you would acknowledge, the very nature of conference tournaments makes the basketball experience, college basketball experience, different from baseball, where you have a chance to parlay it like, NC State did last year. And that's the magic bullet to get you in. That's all.
Yeah. It would, this is the buzzy phrase, like it would cheapen the regular season or diminish the regular season. And I get that, but when I talk to people who actually are in favor, like I'm not in favor of it, I'm just not offended by it. And I don't think it'll be bad or certainly not a killer. There are some people who are actually in favor of this. Like they say, I want to expand it. I'm different. I don't want to expand it, but I'm okay if it does. It'll be fine. But there are people who do want to expand it. And when you talk to them, here's what they would say. Here's what I've had multiple people say to me. They say, okay, you're right. It will lessen the importance of the regular season because just by definition, you won't have to be as good as you otherwise would have had to be to get in. You could lose an extra game or 2 maybe and still get into the field. So does it cheapen the regular season? Sure. Here's what they followed up with. GP, you're the only one watching the regular season. Nobody else cares. All right. And I know you get my point. That's an overstatement, but
it's a massive overstatement when you actually tally up like how many people watch college basketball.
I know, but that's what they'll say. They'll say, instead of talking about who were the last teams in the field in March, you remind me if you can.
That just missed out.
Yeah. No,
was all the teams
that just barely got in.
That just barely got in. So remember Virginia? Virginia should be the reason why. Dan Gavitt should have gone up there on Wednesday, thrown up the True TV broadcast of Virginia in the first 4 and been like, case closed, see you later.
All right, I forgot about that. I take everything I said back. I forgot about that Virginia game. I take everything I said back. But okay, so now under these circumstances, Virginia would be safely in, and we would all say the exact same thing we said about Virginia. How are they in? And then you know what else we'd get? We'd get we get Indiana State in, and like, would that really offend you? And yes, we get some mediocre power conference schools in, and they would play, I guess the way this would work is, and you help me out on the details if I've got them wrong. Right now we have 2 games on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And 2 games on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we would have 4 on Tuesday night and 4 on Wednesday
so let's say we went to 72, you're getting 2 more, you're getting 4 more teams, but that I don't know if it would be 2 more games or 4 more games, but those games would then be housed in that central western to western region so that they could be filtered out to either the
but they would essentially the way I understand it is we will still have a 64 team bracket starting on Thursday.
That's
when we
correct.
get to that Thursday, we're down to 64 and it looks perfect on a piece of paper. Everything, whether we're talking 68, 72, 76, all those extra teams are just feeding into that 64.
They are still feeding into the 64, which also ties into the very delicate topic of automatic qualifiers. There are some at the power conference level that believe that, frankly, my 10th place team shouldn't be held out while this automatic bid from a power or from a conference ranked 29th at KenPom should get in the field. Many people would disagree with that stance. Regardless, it is a very important issue on behalf of the NCAA to not get rid of automatic qualifiers. And so that really gets to the crux of why this is even a discussion here. I think it's based on bogus math and phony logic, but whatever, my opinion, I guess, doesn't much matter in this whole discussion. I will say this, and this hasn't been talked about yet, but you've got it's hilarious to me that these power conference commissioners expanded their leagues of their own volition and their president's volition to go to 16 and 18 team conferences, right? They did this. And now they're worried over the idea that, well, damn, we're just going to get boxed out and a team that might go 500 in our league doesn't get in the field. That's not what's going to happen. You're going to actually get, if you don't expand the NCAA tournament, you're going to get more access than you've had in previous years. And that's because the Pac-12 has been killed off. And not just that, but I want to focus in on the Pac-12 GP. There is, I don't know if this will or won't happen, but I'm just telling you, across college sports, with the looming house case settlement and not knowing how much this is going to cost, there are people kind of looking sideways like, could we have like another one or two conferences actually outright fold before the end of the decade? It seems like a distinct possibility for continual realignment to the economics of it, to schools maybe needed to shift out of D1 because they can't afford it anymore in this new economy. So you've already had one conference go away. You really might get another one or two automatic qualifiers that disintegrate before the media contract on this NCAA tournament comes up. So that one alone, those would turn into at-large bids, okay? But you're not gaining just the Pac-12's automatic bid. You know what you're gaining? You're gaining anywhere from 3 to 6 bids per year that are going to be spread out, and the majority of them, on balance, moving forward, will go to the power conferences. The Pac-12, over the past 10 years, and I'm baking in the 20 year that we didn't have a tournament when the league was projected to get 6 teams into the field. In the past 10 years, the Pac-12 averaged 4.3 bids per year. The Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore, people. Those bids are now going to get dispersed almost certainly to the power conferences. They don't have the auto bid anymore, so that's now 4+ at-large bids. They're effectively being shipped to the power conferences. Maybe even you want to say specifically to your Big Tens and Big 12s that took the majority of these, potentially the ACC as well, but they are getting more access because they have lost a power conference. The machinations led to the, at one point, unthinkable demise of the Conference of Champions, and now no one forced you to go to 18 teams. No one forced you to go to 16 teams, but you're going to have more access. Those bids will be available to you. I haven't heard anyone bring up this point yet, but the idea that staying static at 68 is going to continue to lead to a situation where you're still fighting to get the number 7 team in your league. Guess what? If you're the Big 10, if you're the Big 12, if you're the SEC, the ACC, you're already going to get it because there are more at-large bids that are going to be there to be dispersed. So that again circles back to my point of why we should probably let this bake for 2 or 3 more years. Let's see what the NCAA tournament is like in a 68-team field with this new setup that we have with these power conferences that are bloated and bordering on not even being able to be defined as a conference. You may well find that you're still getting just enough that's fair to get into the field and not having your teams being cut out, left on just on the outside looking in. The elimination of the Pac-12 and the bids that will be dispersed moving forward, I think has a real positive impact for the power conferences and the commissioners that are looking for more quote-unquote access.
All fine arguments. Here's what I would ask you. What has a power conference commissioner ever done or said to make you think they're ever satisfied, that they ever think they got enough?
The fact that the SEC hasn't gone from 16 to 18 yet. That's about it.
They never think they have enough.
That's about it.
Even if you tell them you got more than anybody, they still want more. That's the evolving nature of college athletics is people constantly wanting more and being willing to do away with almost anything in the spirit of more. Rivalries, conferences, geography, they always want more. So I hear you, and I understand the argument of, hey, you guys are the ones who created this problem. All right.
They did. Oh, and they very much did. Yes.
Here's the problem with that sentiment is that they are also the same people who created the problem, like it or not, are the people who have the power to shove this stuff through whatever they want. So you can say, hey, you created this problem, now deal with it. Except they go, you know what? We don't have to deal with it. We can do whatever we want. We're in charge.
Yeah, no, we're going longer than we thought we would, so I won't extend the conversation much further there. There is still plenty to be worked out. The units that have to get paid out and whether some people think that, okay, maybe you keep it at 68. Maybe the units that paid out to the power conferences, maybe they get more money. Maybe that placates them a bit. So you're actually making more per school the more that you advance in the tournament. That needs to be determined. This will get presented again to the men's basketball oversight committee next week, kind of in the same terms as I understand it as it was here this week. And then when the selection committee meets in July, it will delve deeper. I don't think we get a verdict at that meeting, but certainly some much heavier conversations about, all right, 68, 72, or 76. What do we want to do? When do we want to do it? If cooler heads prevail, they at least let us exist in this new and ever-evolving environment in college sports. We don't even have the House case settlement yet. I would really advise against trying to push this forward without knowing what your media landscape and your economic landscape is toward the back half of the decade.
Yeah, and just to unless you got something more, we can move on.
I got nothing more. Not as in the poll, by the way. Keep it the same: 64%, 72, 23%, 76, 8%. More than that, it's 5%. So I mean, that's no surprise. But I did say I'd chime in with the result.
And I just I would vote keep it. I would actually vote put it back to 64.
Oh, you and me both, buddy.
Right. That's what
64. You give me the one wish in related to sports. I would pick 64 in perpetuity before I pick the Bears Super Bowl. That's how much I love these 64 team field.
Oh wow,
that is how much it is the perfect size. But there we go. You
give me a Mets World Series, you could do whatever you want to with the NCAA tournament. I don't cancel it.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
I'll find something else to do. I'm tired of losing my whole life.
Man.
But I mentioned when I talk to people who are, because they'll say I'm in favor of expanding. I don't want to expand. I want to shrink, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I don't think it'll kill anything. The people who are in favor of expanding, what they tell me is, all it does, maybe this is as simple as I put it moves the bubble line to a place where you would notice, but the average sports fan doesn't even pay attention to that. And it would just create more, they do say money eventually, but more postseason games, more NCAA tournament games, and people will watch something, maybe not, the 16 versus the 16. But
gamble.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. The more NCAA tournament games, the better. This is their argument. I'm willing to move the bubble line to a place you might not be comfortable with. In the spirit of it'll give me more NCAA tournament games. And I don't agree with that sentiment, but I do. If I'm being honest, I understand it. I think the reason you get such a loud objection from people like you and our buddy John Rothstein. And again, I'm not for this. I don't want to get twisted around like I'm on the other side of this. I'm not for it either, but some are louder about it than others. The reason there's such a strong reaction from it's the strong reactions typically come from the people who live and die with it every day. And they do understand that, man, we ain't really leaving good teams out of this thing. We're mostly putting at the bottom. We're putting more average teams in annually.
Yes.
On average, than we are leaving good teams out.
Without a doubt. Yes.
Yeah. And I agree with that sentiment. And that's what frustrates, I don't want to speak for you, but I know that's what frustrates a lot of people. Like we're just moving the bar. We're lowering the bar to let more mediocre teams in. Why are we doing this? Get that.
Who wants this? It's completely,
The counter argument is, you know exactly where that bubble line is every day in February and early March. So does Rothstein. So do I. So does Palm. So does Lenardi. Most people don't. Most people are just like, hey, most people just want to go to Jerry Palm's page and go, we're last four in. And right now you're going to be able to have more people in than out, more people closer to the bubble than they otherwise would be. It keeps more fan bases engaged. It just for the same reason Mets fans are only one game out of the wild card right now.
I know. For now. Let's check in a month.
I know. But that would be the counter argument, the other side. And I do understand it, even if I would still vote the other way.
All right, fair enough. More to come on this potentially in the month of July. But yeah, how about a little NCAA tournament talk to really inject the cycle here? If you thought we were going live, by the way, for JJ Redick being hired to the Lakers, you were sadly mistaken, and we are now 34 minutes into the show. But congrats to JJ Redick as by the way, of being the next Lakers head coach. Also a fascinating development. Hey, speaking of the NBA, do you want to yell at me from my big board or what?
I don't want to yell at anybody about anything. I'm tired of yelling about stuff. I'm done. I'm done for a minute.
Yeah.
Hey, I do want to ask you about something with your big board, though. You mentioned on Tuesday's pod, if I remember correctly, that you were working on it. Then it published I clicked on it, and lo and behold, the number one player on Matt Norlander's big board for the 2024 NBA draft, it's Dalton Knecht from your Tennessee Vols. Why? I'll ask him next. First, a word from our partners. Shouts to Anderson Cooper. Shouts to Knuckles. No. Shouts to Knuckles.
They're gone. They're out of here.
I'll never forget Knuckles.
I know. Well, I think it might be coming to your Paramount app really quickly here.
Oh,
so
I can't wait. I can't wait for
dial
that.
it up.
Hey, I did go see Inside Out 2.
I have not seen Inside Out 2, but kids and I will get to that eventually here. A big month for like just general Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff in the Norlander household. So that's
Inside Out 2 is great.
Yeah. All right.
Inside Out 2 is good. 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up. All right. Fair enough.
Hey, so while I was watching Inside Out 2, you were doing a big board.
I was.
And you put Dalton Knecht at number 1, which I don't agree with it, but I don't think it's bananas. I do think it's unusual. Most people don't have Dalton Knecht that high. Yeah. I'm not saying nobody does, because somebody might. You do. Why? Are you just a radio host trying to get calls? You're just trying to get calls.
I'm not. No. Okay.
Or do you really believe Dalton Knecht? Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Do you believe? Does your big board suggest you believe Dalton Knecht will be the best player from this draft?
Yes. So that is bingo, bango. So every year I put out essentially a big board, and it has been presented in the format of a mock draft in the past, but let's just present this what it is. I am trying to project the players in order that I expect to have the most fruitful, successful, best NBA careers in a given class. As I mentioned earlier on Tuesday, I am unfortunately and genuinely on balance underwhelmed by this class. If you told me there weren't more than 20 guys in this class that don't make a second contract, I'd believe you. And I'd love to be wrong, but as you know, you talk to folks around the league who absolutely mimic this opinion, man. It is very much, hey, we might get to this guy in the teens or whatever, and maybe we get lucky and he winds up being something. So I pick Knecht. Here's my top 6, because I actually think the top 6 that I have them in the same bucket, if you will. I don't think there's a lot that separating them and their growth potential at the NBA level, even if they're different ages and different positions. But these were the 6 names that I consider to put at number 1. I have Dalton Knecht 1. I have Alex Sarr at 2. I have Reed Sheppard at 3. I have Zachary Rizachet at 4. I have Devin Carter at 5, and I have Donovan Clingan at 6. Those were the 6 players that I actually considered. And yes, you heard me right. Devin Carter is at 5. I love his two-way potential, and I think he can be an extremely successful NBA player. I went with Knecht because he's a 6'6" wing who's really athletic, is certainly competent on defense. He's got what I describe as confrontational athleticism. He's unafraid to get into the paint, and he is a great shooter. And yes, he's a late bloomer. He didn't start out as a Division I player, but in a draft where it does feel, GP, like we are just tossing darts, I am going to bet on the guy that I think has the best combo of deep shooting ability, good size, isn't a sieve on defense, and has real athleticism. And he's also, he's a bit of an MFer there out on the floor. So I went with him over Sarr, who he might go 1, he might not go 1, but there are way more questions about Sarr as an offensive producer to be like a number 1 kind of guy. I think defensively he's good, but I wasn't sold on him as being most likely to be the best all-around player. Reed Sheppard, he's arguably a better shooter than Knecht. He's certainly younger. He has more value as a prospect because he is younger, but he's not as rangy. He's not as tall as Knecht. And so because of that, I think I have him 3rd on the list. Like I love so much about Sheppard, but as I wrote there, I said his measurables and some legitimate questions about his defensive durability are the only things holding him back. If Reed Sheppard was 3 inches taller, just like if anyone else was necessarily 3 inches taller, but if Reed Sheppard specifically, if you didn't adjust the height of anyone else in the draft, but you gave Reed Sheppard 3 more inches, he'd be the number 1 pick in this draft. He just would be. I have him 3rd. Rizachet, he's an up and like most people watching and listening to this podcast have not seen Reese Shea play. He has some number one buzz to the Hawks. We'll see if that winds up being the case. I have talked to a few folks about him, and I have done my diligence trying to watch. I just don't see a prospect that is like, yep, that should be the number one guy. He's going to be the best NBA player of the group. Devin Carter, say no more, man. I think he is ultra competitive, an elite NBA on-ball defender, can play the point, has the size, his shooting has improved. I love a lot about him. And actually in recent days, you've seen how he's been talking more. I think he talked to Kevin O'Connor at The Ringer about studying Jalen Brunson's game. Love to hear that. And then Klingon, or our buddy Sam Vecini, we'll try and get him on before the show's over. He has Klingon mocked 1 to the Hawks, which does actually match. Hurley told me this on the record, which I appreciated, but actually heard it through another source off the record, that the Hawks actually are pretty intrigued with Klingon. We'll see if he actually goes number 1 when he gets to the draft next week. And the only reason why I didn't put Klingon number 1 is, can we really see him growing into the kind of perimeter and kind of deeper shooter that might validate him having the best career of them all? So I'm not trying to say who's going to be the best rookie. I'm not trying to tell you who's going to be best at the end of the first contract. I'm trying to project out when we get to the end of the career, 10 plus years in the future, 15 years in the future, who do I think is most likely to be the best NBA player? And so for that reason, I took Knecht. By the way, I have Kyle Filipowski, who I'm way higher on than everyone, at 7, Cody Williams at 8, Zach Edey at 9, and Stephon Castle at 10.
I thought I was higher than most on Devin Carter. I've got him mocked 9th to the Grizzlies right now. His father, of course, is an assistant coach there. He's somebody who could play beside Ja Morant. He's somebody who could back up Ja Morant. Obviously, Ja hasn't been available 82 games ever. So, like, you know, you might need a starting point guard at some points in the season as well for a variety of reasons. And though his age might work against him, Devin Carter, I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
With some franchises, I don't think it should with the Grizzlies. Like, they're trying to go right now. Like, I know that they're not on everybody's radar because this season was a disaster and Ja's had injury and off the court problems. But before this year, they finished second in the West 2 straight years with like 22 and 23-year-olds. They were the Oklahoma City Thunder before the Oklahoma City Thunder were. And now all those guys should be healthy and older next year. They're trying to, I'm not sitting here and saying they're going to win the West next year, but they're trying to, and they think they can compete for it. So, like, the negativity that might be attached to Devin Carter's age by, say, a Pistons franchise that's in a total rebuild mode, it should not be considered a negative for a franchise like the Grizzlies that are trying to win right now. So I don't know that he'll end up there. Nobody knows if he'll end up there, but I thought I was high on him at 9. You've got him in your top 5.
Just so we're clear, though, I know you know this, GP, but like, I'm not projecting Devin Carter will be a top 5 pick. I think that he will wind up being one of the 5 best players in this. Yeah,
you're not even you're not even projecting Dalton Knecht will be a top 5 pick.
No, I'm not.
Right,
I would actually be stunned if he was a top 5 pick. His age is going to be one of the things that holds him back. But Knecht, and I'm not saying if you're a top 2 NBA player or top 2 college player, you're going to be a top 10 NBA player. That just so happens to be the case in this big board, because I believe you and I both know it's not just about like how well you shoot, but it's how you get your shots and how you play in an offense. Knecht, to me, man, it would be hard for me to see how he would not have a sustaining NBA career, and he has all the tools there. With Edey, who I have at 9, it's not that he was the 2-time National Player of the Year. That there's plenty of stock in that, and he's not going to go in the top 10. To me, it would be almost a failure of a coaching staff if they drafted him and couldn't find ways to use him, because he's smart, intelligent, and he actually has the combination of all of these things that he's done and proven, and the size is undeniable. And he hasn't been playing college basketball, but since the back half of his high school since the back half of his high school career. So the fact that he is still actually improving, like by the year, if not by the month, makes him, to me, an intriguing prospect. I'm not saying that he's going to be able to be on the floor with 4 minutes to go in a 2 versus 7 NBA playoff series a year from now if he happens to be on that kind of team. I'm not projecting that, but I do think that he has a very good chance at sticking on a roster, being deployed correctly, and averaging somewhere, maybe 12.5 and 8.5 for his career. And so I would, if I'm a team picking in the teens, especially in this kind of draft, I don't know, man. I would lean there. But again, I'm just a dude who covers college basketball, talks to some scouts and folks about these prospects. I don't proclaim to have the very best eye when it comes to this stuff. I do occasionally hit on some. I occasionally miss on some, and I am lower on some other guys than some. I'm higher on some other guys than some. I got Terrence Shannon at 14. You want to talk about TSJ? No? Okay. Tyler Kolek is at 15. I'm higher on him than most. I got Trey Alexander at 22. I don't think he'll go in the first round. Trey Alexander, I think, needs to be taken in the first round. I think he is a tremendous prospect who can do a little bit of everything and be a good backup guard in the league. And then you've seen a lot of Tristan De Silva buzz out there. I actually think KJ Simpson, his teammate from Colorado, will get taken after Cody Williams, but I like KJ Simpson a lot there. So that's just a little bit of a taste. You can read this on CBSSports.com and the CBS Sports app. We'll make sure we put a link to it also in the podcast description. But just, a fun little projection. Let me ask you. You don't do it necessarily the big board. You do the mock. You mentioned you were high on Devin Carter. Is there one or two players that you either maybe haven't even put in a first-round mock that you think you would give a top 30 grade to, or someone that you might have mocked at, 10, 12, 14, or wherever that you just personally you are higher on than maybe the consensus is right now?
Reed Sheppard, I would put number one. I would take Reed Sheppard first in this draft. And there was something interesting you said there. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying this always gets twisted up.
Mm-hmm.
Buddy, I've noticed lately my words get twisted up sometimes. People don't take them the way I intend them. So let me say this as clearly as I can say it. I'm not comparing Reed Sheppard to Steph Curry.
There he did it.
But
I follow you on this, by the way.
If you go through the draft process heading into the Steph Curry draft,
yes,
everybody said the same things. It's the same stuff. Like,
I
okay,
agree
yeah,
with
he
this
can
entirely.
really shoot. Yeah, he can really shoot, but is he really a point guard? Is he really going to be somebody you can just put the ball in his hands? And is he going to be able to lead an offense, be a lead guard? And God, he's just so small. And look at him. Like, is he this enough? And is he that enough? All the shooting and all the dribbling, it was all there at day. We saw it all. I could remember after the Elite Eight run, we were at LeBron James camp or something. It was one of those things where all the best, some college players come in and then the best incoming freshmen are there. I don't remember exactly, but I remember DeMar DeRozan was there. Steph Curry was there. I want to say like Tyreek Evans was there. They were counselors at this camp. And in between sessions, they would play pickup, and there were a lot of NBA scouts there to watch these pickup games. And this was before Steph's last year of college, but after the incredible run to the Elite Eight where he became a phenom, right? Such a big phenom that he got Davidson into the Jimmy V the subsequent year. That kind of stuff doesn't happen, but that was the star power of Steph Curry. I remember being at this thing when the NBA scout was sitting there and we were just watching. And this was still when people weren't even saying Steph Curry's a top 10 pick, at this point. They were like, I don't know, that was a nice little mid-major run, but I don't know. And I'll never forget this. NBA scout sitting right with me. We're watching all these guys who are supposed to be the top picks in the next draft. You know what he said? Who's better than him? Nobody here's better than him, pointing at Steph. Like, you could keep looking at all these mock drafts and listening to people. I'm just telling you, I watched the NCAA tournament. I watched him last year. I'm watching him right now. He's the best player out here. And yet, you, at the end of the day, franchises just got caught up too much on what they imagined he couldn't do, as opposed to just look at the stuff that's right in front of you. And when you said, if Reed Sheppard was 3 inches taller, he'd be the number one pick, I go, what if somebody would have said that about Steph Curry? Because at 6'2", he's still like, Steph Curry at 6'2" should have been the number one pick in that draft. And I'm not saying Reed Sheppard's going to be in it. I'm not.
Curry was, what's wild. I know you're not saying that. Let me just jump in real quick. Curry was even semi-controversial as a top 10 pick that year, even coming off of think back to that time and place and how much he had done as a college player. And we're talking about a dude who, Jimmy Patsos was a little wild in general, but literally like Jimmy Patsos. If you have not Google.
Oh, it's the funniest thing. I think this is how I
definitely wrote about it. You wrote about it.
I think I ripped Jimmy, and looking back on it, I apologize to Jimmy.
No, I mean,
because it's hilarious.
He was like guarding him 4-on-1. It was insanity. Anyway, so there's a lot of that. Now, I want to be clear on this, and I think GP would agree. Reed Sheppard doesn't have the dazzle that Curry's game has, and he didn't have a lot of the one-on-one playmaking that Curry had displayed over more years at Davidson, frankly. But there's a lot of similarities, and I have thought about this. And if you told me that we looked up in 8 to 10 years, and Reed Sheppard was consistently viewed as one of the 3 best shooters in the NBA, one, I would believe you, and 2, if that actually came to be, there would be a very strong likelihood that because of that fact, that Reed Sheppard wound up being the best prospect in this draft. Yes, I've thought about this a lot. Yeah.
So just like you, I've missed. I'm right sometimes about prospects. I'm wrong sometimes about prospects. You're right sometimes. You're wrong sometimes. So is Oklahoma City's general manager
Presti
and the Sam Presti and the Oklahoma City's front office. Everybody gets some right. Everybody gets some wrong. All right. It's funny, like you get one wrong, you say, I don't really know about this guy, and then he becomes an all-star, and like your mentions are just.
Are you speaking from experience?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, except I ain't had one person tweet me about Jordan Poole in at least a year. Where are all the Jordan Poole people who used to tweet me? Where are you? Did they all die or move to Bloomington?
I think they became Illinois fans.
Did all the Jordan Poole fans die or move to Bloomington? That's what I need to know, because I ain't heard from them in a while. And also, where are the Emmanuel Quickly fans? Where are you guys?
I'm serious about this, man. This is, as your friend, we got HQ coverage next week. And by the way, we got a mock draft special that's going to come on Monday afternoon. Be on the lookout for that. I better see some C's or worse from you this year, okay?
I think I'm out the grade game.
You're out of the grade game. Okay.
No, because my autistic mind will not allow me to do things that don't make sense to me. So like your producer wants you to you got to give somebody an F and I'm like, if a franchise does in this spot exactly what I would have done in this spot, how does it logically make sense for me to say that's an F? They're literally doing what
they're pulling you off it because you were too soft. That's what it is.
Well,
Okay.
Because I would come on HQ and I would go, and I'm just making something up here. If I were the Suns, I would take this player here. And then they'd come on and take this player, the exact same player I just said. And I'd say, well, I guess that's an A+. And they go, you're giving too many A's. I'm like, they just did what I told them to do.
You're no Pete Prisco. You're no Pete Prisco. Yeah.
I know.
You are no Pete Prisco. I know that much.
So like how ridiculous would I sound if I said, if I were the Suns here, I would take Matt Norlander. And then Adam Silver's like, and with the 22nd pick, the Phoenix Suns take Matt Norlander. And I go, D. He'd be like, what? D? You just said that's
you know what? I'd understand. I would.
Yeah. Okay.
That might even be generous.
I might just do it. I might ask to get back on the grades and then do it and be like, this is what you said you wanted. Everybody's getting D's. So I think I'm out. But what if I just with the number 1 pick, the Hawks take Donovan Clingan. D, he stinks. Yes. Just everybody you know what? I've believed this for a while. If you just played law of averages and just every time they asked you about a prospect, say, I don't think this is a good pick, you'd be right more than you're wrong.
I know you absolutely. That's all
you have to do.
That's the truth. You would be right way more often than not.
If you just say after every one of them, this and now let's go to GP. So GP, what do you think about the Spurs taking Stephon Castle? Just not going to work. Probably a mistake. If you just said that every time, you would be right way more often than you're wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to need at least one of those next week. I'm going to need at least one.
What if I just go straight into character on the draft cover? Just be like,
I'm going to need at least one of them.
So GP, Alex Sarr to the Wizards. I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, just every one of them. Just like, I don't know about this one.
Yeah, it almost sounds like I think you should leave kind of sketch. I kind of like it.
I'm going to be the most negative draft night analyst in the world. I'm going to assume nobody's going to work out. And that's the other thing about it. First off, most of these guys will not work out. Most of these guys will never talk about again.
Yep.
But to your point about being a weak draft, the last draft I remember people talking about this is the dumbest draft in the history of draft. 2013, that's the one where Anthony Bennett went number 1. It's a weak draft. Anthony Bennett went number 1. He was a disaster, right?
Yeah.
You know who else was also in that draft? Giannis, Rudy Gobert. So I agree that broadly speaking, this is a weak draft. An NBA All-Star or 2 or 3 are coming out of this draft.
They should.
I don't know who they are, but they will. They will. It just you don't.
Well, trivia time, and that I don't have an answer to. I'd be genuinely curious. Let's set 2018 as the most recent bar. What's the most recent pre-2018 draft that didn't produce an All-Star? I'd be curious.
I have looked at this before, and I don't want to speak definitively on it because I don't remember the results, but it was basically every draft produces an All-Star.
How about that? All right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a one-time All-Star reserve, but
someone was drafted and appeared in an All-Star game.
You're going to have a hard time finding a draft that didn't produce an NBA All-Star. So this one will as well. I would go with Reed Sheppard. The other guy I'm higher on than most, Jacoby Walter at Baylor.
Okay.
I think if you
top 15.
I would have him top 10 as well, and most people don't right now. I think sometimes it's a little bit like AP polls. You're better off sometimes going back to the very first one and just looking at that than you are looking at something in the middle of the season, because you can get caught up in you can get away from what your initial thoughts were. And I think some of that's happened with Walter. He was not amazing at Baylor, but he wasn't bad either. And if you just believe in him as a shooter with size and a score, like I would take him in the top 10. I'm not sure he's going to go in the top 10. On Knecht, I'm not as high as you are on him, obviously, but I'm not certain if I were really putting a big board together, I wouldn't have him in the top 5 range. I'm always interested talking to our former NBA players who we work with about prospects. I remember this moment specifically, very early in the season. We're just sitting in the studio watching games, and Wally Zerbiak, we were at a Tennessee game on one of the screens, and he just it was like, this was early in the season. And he said, GP, where do you have him in your mock draft? And I said, who? He said, Dalton Knecht. I said, well, I haven't even done a mock draft yet. Like, it's so early for that. I think I did a lottery last year, but I have not done an actual mock draft. He was like, well, where is he in other people's mock drafts? I was like, I don't think he's in there. He's not a top 30 pick right now. He's a mid-major player who just enrolled at Tennessee. He's like, that's crazy. He will play in the NBA. Like, that's nuts. He's got size. Look at his shoulders, high release. He can bounce it. He was like, that guy. Like, Wally might applaud you by putting him at the top of the board. Wally was a big fan of Dalton Knecht. And I always love that. Like, there's some people who live and die with, say, KenPom or mock drafts, and they're very in tune with everything. And then Wally, I say this, he'll look at him, but he's not going to come in and be like, so where was he ranked at 24/7 Sports? He's never asked me that. He just sort of watches it and he's like, oh, I see something there. That guy can play. That guy's good. And without knowing, is Dalton Knecht on mock drafts or not, he was like, it is crazy if people don't have this guy in their mock drafts. I'm telling you, he can play in that league. Look up now and you've got him number 1. Everybody has him in the top 10. So I'm a believer in Knecht. I think he's going to be very good. I wouldn't have him 1, but I wouldn't have him far away from 1.
Really fun story. We look at the journey he's taken over the past few years, and now, he's got the lottery room invite and green room invite, and he'll be taking the lottery. Could be a top 10 pick. By the way, classic show here. Before we went on, I was like, we can make this a quick episode. Good God, man, we're at an hour. Let's get the hell out of here.
I've even got C-Spire. They were out here earlier today. We had another little pod thing go out, and so I had them come out today, and then I told them, I said, listen, I got to be on it. I had to do HQ before this. So I said, I got this thing at 2:15 Central, then I got another thing at 3. I said, just come back at 4 if you can. I'll be wrapped up way before 4. It's 4 right now. They're probably in my driveway.
They're outside your house right now.
I don't know.
All right, that's a show.
That's going to do a show. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle, legend. Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching and listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. More of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. Shouts to Knuckles. Shouts to Anderson Cooper. We're going to talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.